Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is Technique Tuesday. I have 3 swatches here. They all have a tubular cast on. It's a kind of cast on that really works nicely for knit one, purl one ribbing because the edge is really invisible. It just rolls around. I did not use the standard method of tubular cast on to start these. I used cast on methods that are normally used for other kinds of edges. I used the cable cast on for this one. For these two, I used the long tail cast on in slightly different ways. You can get started with a tubular cast on using any sort of cast on that produces an edge, whatever you're most familiar with. One of the reasons that you might want to use the technique that I'm going to show you is that when you use a standard tubular cast on technique, the foundation stitches are just loops on the needle. It's very unstable, and especially on a circular needle, when you have a lot of stitches, they twist around easily. And so as you're trying to work that first row and make sure that you have the stitches on the needle correctly, it can be really hard to tell that. And I have ripped out many tubular cast-ons and started over because I've had trouble with that. The method I'm going to show you today, that really won't be an issue. When we're working in the round with knit one, purl one ribbing, we need an even number of stitches so that you can do complete repeats in the round and maintain stitch pattern continuity from the end of the round to the beginning of the round. So we need an even number for that, but we're going to cast on with waste yarn, so not our project yarn. We're going to cast on half that number. So if you needed 200 stitches for your project, you're going to cast on 100. I want 40 stitches, so I cast on 20. And I used a cable cast on here. You can use the long tail cast on, you can use a knitting on, you can use crochet cast on, you can use any kind of cast on that you are very comfortable using in any other situation. You don't have to think about how to do it. So I've got my stitches here, I've cut the yarn, and now I'm going to attach my actual working yarn that I'm going to use for the project. I'm just going to tie this. This is temporary, but it's going to provide tension to the yarn, and we're going to slide that up right next to the needle like this. So regardless of what kind of cast on you did, you're going to create a yarn over, and then you're going to work one of these stitches. So you're going to alternate yarn over, knit a stitch all the way across. So I hold the yarn in my left hand typically. So a yarn over at the beginning of a row is very easy. I just put my needle under here, and now I can work the next stitch, and I'll have my yarn over. If you hold the yarn in your right hand, make sure the yarn is forward. You're going to put the needle in to that first stitch. Then you're going to grab the yarn from the front and bring it over the back, so that you create your yarn over, and now you can work that first stitch, and you'll have a yarn over and a knitted stitch on the needle. So you're going to just alternate yarn over, knit one all the way across, and that's going to create your foundation stitches that you need in the full stitch count that you need for the tubular cast on. So I've got my 40 stitches on the needle, and now I can join in the round to do my setup rows. So I'm using magic loops, so I need to just kind of divide this up. For my setup rows, I want to knit those yarn overs, and I'm going to slip the stitches that I actually knit. And I'm going to repeat that all the way across. I'm going to knit that yarn over, bring the yarn to the front, and slip as if to purl. Bring it to the back to work the knit stitch, and then I'm bringing the yarn to the front so that I can slip that stitch. The stitches that I'm slipping now will be the purl columns later on. I need to bring the yarn to the front as if I was going to purl them and slip those stitches. So I'm going to do this all the way around. So I finished that first round, and now I need to do my second setup round. The stitches that I knit in that first round are going to be slipped and the stitches that I slipped in that first round are going to be purled. So we're still going to be alternating the yarn position each time. I'm slipping those knit stitches. So I'm going to slip. My needle is going to enter as if to purl in order to maintain that stitch mount from this needle to the right needle, but the yarn needs to be in the position it would have been in if it were to be knit. So it's in the back. I'm going to slip that stitch. I'm going to move the yarn to the front, and then I'm going to purl this stitch. So I move the yarn to the back to slip it, move it to the front to purl it, move it to the back to slip that knit, move to the front to purl the stitch. So you get into a certain rhythm in that first round, and you kind of have to pay attention in the second one to make sure that you are working the stitches that need to be worked and slipping those that need to be purled, because it is opposite. So we've worked those first 2 setup rounds. Some people like to go right into their ribbing after just 2 setup rounds, and other people like to do 4 setup rounds. I typically do 4 when I am doing a tubular cast on, so I will just repeat those 2 setup rounds a second time. And again, I'm still using my smaller needles to do that. I have my 4 setup rows complete. I can tell they're complete because I have 2 knit columns that I can see on the front, because each of these knit stitches only got worked twice. And if I look on the back side, the purl stitches look like knits on the back, and I can see 2 rows of stitches there as well. So my setup rows are complete, and this is the point where I could join in and use the ribbing needle size that I need for the rest of the ribbing and just begin working it in knit 1, purl 1 ribbing. I've done a row of the regular knitting, but as soon as I finish those setup rows, I can remove this yarn that we used to establish the foundation stitches. I'm going to use a pair of sharp scissors. I'm going to come up from underneath. I'm going to make sure that I'm not actually cutting an actual stitch, and I'm going to snip it. And I'm going to do that in multiple places in the round. Again, making sure that I'm not cutting any actual yarn. And then this waste yarn can just get picked out all the way around. And that's going to leave that nice edge that you see here. So here's an example of a swatch that I did exactly like I've been showing you here, where I started with the cable cast on. If you want to use the long tail cast on to start this technique, you could use your waste yarn and then cast on half the number of stitches that you needed for your total cast on, like I showed you with the cable cast on. But because you're using 2 strands, you have another option if you're doing the long tail cast on. That is to start with both the project yarn and your waste yarn and do a slip knot using both of those yarns. Put that on the needle. Again, you're still using that that needle that's 2 sizes smaller. And now you're going to get set up to do the long tail cast on, and you're going to use that waste yarn for your thumb, but you're going to use your project yarn for your index finger. You're going to work your yarn over first, and then you're going to work a regular long tail cast on stitch. Yarn over, long tail cast on. So you're going to cast on the full amount, but you're creating that foundation edge at the same time that you're doing your yarn overs and your knit stitches, so that by the time that you're done with it, you will have all of the stitches that you need on the needle. You don't have to work across them in order to double them first, but you still have that kind of edge that really helps you create a stable start. So once you've established all of your stitches and you want to join in the round, this double slip knot does not count as a stitch. But what you need to do when you are first joining in the round is you don't want to knock that slip knot off of the needle, because then you have a yarn over that could also fall off. So what you do instead is you leave that double slip knot on the needle, and then you insert into that yarn over to work it. And Then you let both of those fall off the needles, and then you can go into your slipping and knitting all the way across. The advantage to using a familiar cast on for the foundation is that the process is automatic. You know how to do that cast on. In addition, it adds a stable edge from which you can build the tubular edge. This disadvantage, of course, is having to remove and pick out that waste yarn later. My personal favorite method for starting a tubular cast on is using the crochet cast on. The disadvantage of the crochet cast on is that it may not be as automatic or familiar to some knitters. But the advantage of the crochet cast on is that it doesn't have to be snipped and picked out. When it's set up properly, the chain can be unzipped, which leaves the yarn threaded through the base stitches. It can then be removed by just pulling it out. I did a series of videos on how the crochet cast on could be used for all sorts of different project starting points, including using it to start a tubular cast on. You can find that playlist of uses for the crochet cast on over here or down in the video description. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rox Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.